Today I'm doing a collaboration with Cache Warren. We got together and we had a chat about the fact that we are both writing or have written books that are set in the real world but are magical. So we're building our magical world off of reality. And so that's what this is all about. I'm gonna link her video below and over here. Make sure you go and check out hers. The great thing about this is that we're both doing different questions. So you'll get to hear about different aspects of world building and magical world building in reality. I think this will be really good because for one, I don't really do craft videos per se. That's why I like doing this, because it's really about our experiences writing those worlds. But I think if you're a person that's interested in doing urban fantasy or contemporary fantasy, basically any sort of magic set and based in the real world, that this could be kind of helpful for you to hear about our process and hear about how we came up with everything. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. This is a question and answer format. So the first question is, why did you choose to base this world in this specific place? So my debut novel, Blood Like Magic, coming out in summer 2021 from Margaret K. McElderry, that is set in Toronto. So this is kind of obvious for me because, and maybe like if you've watched my videos, this is probably obvious to you too, but I grew up in Toronto. That's what I call my city, you know? And so that's a really important place to me. I know a lot about it because I grew up there, because I, except for now during quarantine, currently live there. Once I get a job again, COVID is over, I'll be back there. And so that was something that held a lot of importance for me, and that's why I picked that place. Also, when I was writing Blood Like Magic, I was living up north where I am now, but more permanently. And I was really missing living in Toronto and being in my city. And so writing that was a way for me to reconnect with all of those things about Toronto that I really loved. And so that's why I picked that place specifically. But usually when I'm writing my books, because my horror work in progress that I'm working on is also set in the real world, and I actually set that up north. So I really try and pick places that I'm very familiar with. I don't like to write about places that I don't have a really strong personal connection to and don't know a lot about. I think just because for me it's easier to put forward that story with a place that I'm really familiar with. It helps me really expand the world and expand the description and get it really on point, not only just like what the place looks like, but also the vibe of the place and how the people are and that sort of thing. And I can really experience that best when I've lived there for a certain period of time. And so I think that's really why I choose the places that I choose. What are some considerations that I made when mixing genres? So this is something that's kind of interesting because Blood Like Magic, even though it is an urban fantasy, it has science fiction elements. And so it's not only adding magical elements, it's also adding the sci-fi elements. And so some considerations I made was, even though I pants my world building, which is, I plot and outline everything else, but I do pants my world building, I'm still considering things that are happening. So when I was thinking, I started with the magic and the witches and how that would work together in their family and thinking about that. And then I thought about the setting specifically in regards to the sci-fi, because not everyone is doing magic, but everyone is affected by the fact that this is set in the near future, and imagining how my landmarks would look and imagining the sort of technology people had. So really what I did was I started with the technology we have now, and I thought of how could we bump it up just a little bit more, enough that it's like, okay, this is the future, but not too much that it's like, would we actually accomplish that in the next however many years? Or is that like when you put flying cars in your movie and then 20 years later people are like, we don't have those sort of thing. So those are really some considerations I made. And then after that, it was blending the two. So figuring out how magic and witches would interact with a high-tech society, would interact with things like advances in genetics and how they would think about that interacting with their community and interacting with magic, especially in my story where ancestry is so important, and ancestry comes down to genetics. Like, your genetics are your ancestry in large part. Like, that's the kind of thing that you pass down whether you like it or not. And so those were really considerations I made. So how the setting would look in the future, how the magic would be, and how those two would interact, because I really wanted to do my best to blend those genres. I didn't want them to be two completely separate things, because they do go together and they do interact with each other. And those were kind of the considerations I made when doing that. To portal or not portal, deciding how integrated my magic system or hidden my magic system would be. So I think this is something that comes up a lot, especially when you're doing like an urban fantasy or contemporary fantasy, which is of course what we're talking about today. But you have this dilemma where it's like, do I want the magical world to be completely integrated in the real world, or do I want them to sometimes portal through to a kind of separate world? So I think if you think of like the Mortal Instruments trilogy by Cassandra Clare, so they were in the real world and they would fight demons and stuff there, but then sometimes they would go through this like portal to Idris, which was like the Shadow Hunter land, and that was like completely separate / alongside the real world. But when I read it, I understood it to be like a separate place. The same thing I think of like The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. There's a portal in that situation, like between fairyland and the human land, and they go through that. So it's like set in the real world, but they're going to a separate world that is alongside ours. And my last example I can think of is Labyrinth Lost by Zoraida Cordova. That one is the same thing. So they're witches, and they're witches in the real world, and they're practicing on their own there, but they also like go through a portal to a separate world. Because I was scarred by having written a portal book in the past and being constantly told that portal fantasy doesn't sell, I like don't touch portals at all. I do not fuck with a portal. I do not. And so when I was creating my magical world, I knew that wasn't going to be it. I knew it was really going to be integrated with society, but still hidden. So the average person wasn't going to know about witches, but certain communities were, and they were going to really use their magic in the real world, doing kind of real world sort of careers and that sort of thing. And that's kind of a consideration you just kind of make on your own. I think there are a lot of strengths to the portal world. I think that's kind of cool, because then you can have characters that know about the real world and might use like real world slang and that sort of thing, but then they're in a separate world, so you're kind of getting that high fantasy feel. But I can't touch it, and so that's why I didn't. And how I decided to use and adapt landmarks in my story. I think this becomes really important when you're doing contemporary or urban fantasy, because you're setting it in the real world. So there are going to be real world landmarks. And I think people really like that, at least me, when I read urban or contemporary fantasy and like a landmark comes up that's like in the real world, that makes me really excited. Like when I read Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, like the fact that those were all real Yale College buildings was super cool to me. I love that the map was like a real Yale map. Like, to me, that's the stuff that I nerd out about. That makes me really excited hearing about all of those places, and then knowing that readers could like go to those places and visit and be like, oh my gosh, this is part of this world, and this is like they're New York and they mention like the Met or something, and you're like, oh, this is how they've reimagined that place. And so that was something that was really cool to me. All of the landmarks I chose for Blood Like Magic are places that I have a personal connection to. It is my city. I've lived there, since I was 7. I'm now 20, what am I turning this year? I'm turning 29, so like more than 20 years, basically on and off. There were a couple of years I was gone. I've lived in Toronto, so there are a lot of places that hold a really special place in my heart, and those are all places that I wanted to put in the book. And then it was imagining what they would look like in the future. And so for me, that was twofold, because I had to think about how it would look in the near future, and then I also had to think about how a magical community would interact with it. And so sometimes they like blended together and sometimes they were a bit more separate, but I do have two examples. So the first one is the Ontario College of Arts and Design. I used to volunteer at the Art Gallery of Ontario. I did that for 2 years when I was in high school. It was the best time of high school. Those are like my most treasured memories, was doing that volunteering. And so I would pass by the Arts College all the time and imagining a near future in which STEM is really important, so science and technology, but also that education has become even more expensive and inaccessible than it already is, and how that would look like for an arts college. And in my future, that means the art college was closed down and it was turned into a sort of STEM building. In this case, it's the building of a major genetic corporation. And so that's kind of how I twisted that into the future, because I'm thinking about all those elements of how life would change around and how that would affect the landmarks. And then some places I do kind of like hidden magic things. Dixie Outlet Mall, this is like a mall in Mississauga, but went there all the time as a child with my family because we went to outlet malls, and I realized in adulthood that it had like this little secret underground flea market, like this huge underground flea market. And so in this magic, you know, community that's kind of alongside but hidden, I reimagined that as becoming a market for witches to go and like share their wares and like sell stuff and communicate with each other. And so that became a kind of hidden part. And so I think there's so many like fun things you can do with landmarks. I specifically choose ones I really love and I'm really familiar with, because it gives me a thrill to see it in the book, but also because then I know more stuff about it. Some things I could just kind of research more for sure, but I think for me there's just that extra layer that comes on when I already know a good amount about that place. So yeah, that's kind of how I did my landmark stuff. I picked the landmarks first and then I thought about how I could integrate them. Yeah. So that's it for my portion of the How We Built Magical Worlds from Reality. Please go check out Caché's video and see, like, because she's got different questions and she'll have different answers and she's working with a different world. So you'll be able to get another perspective of how someone comes up with world building for a contemporary or urban fantasy. And I think that'll be super interesting to you. Also, Cachet is awesome. And if you're not subscribed to her already, you really should. And yeah, that was this whole video. I hope it was helpful for you to kind of hear at least a bit about my world building process. I've never wanted to make like a craft world building video just because I pants so much of my world building and I have to backtrack and fix so many things. So I don't have like a tried and true method that I could confidently teach to other people and be like, yeah, this is, you know, a good way to world build, because I'm so off the cuff with it. But I really loved doing this to kind of give some more insider information about how I came up with some of the things I came up with for Blood Like Magic. Of course, you can add my book to Goodreads below. I'll have links for that. I always have links for that anyway. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any other comments or questions, feel free to comment with them and I will answer them to the best of my ability. I will say again, I am not a world building expert by any means, because the way I do mine is so chaotic, but I can definitely share my experience with you and try and help you in that way. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!